Closed for the season, Chapter 7. Arthur led me down an overgrown path, stopping now and then to examine a crumbling building or the remains of a ride. Here and there, storybook figures emerged from the kudzu, lopsided, grotesque, their noses gone, their fingers missing, their skin leprous with mold and moss. The place was a nightmare version of Mother Goose. "Did you read Zippy the Pinhead?" Arthur asked. "The comic strip?" I shook my head, too amazed by my surroundings to be interested in anything else. Zippy's the guy with the pointed head and the little top-knot tie with the bow. He wears a long robe and he loves talking to giant sculptures, the kind that advertise things like restaurants and ice cream stands and repair shops. I glanced at Arthur. "Yeah?" In one strip, Zippy came here once to talk to some of them. Arthur waved his arm at the crumbling statues. "Now that I think about it, Dad loves Zippy," I said, "but I've always thought he was kind of boring." "You just don't get the humor." Arthur's tone of voice suggested that I might not be smart enough to appreciate Zippy. "Which means I know what it means," he interrupted. "I'm just as smart as you are. I just don't like Zippy, that's all." Arthur shrugged and kept walking. In a few minutes we came to a pond scummed so thick with algae it looked as if you could walk on it without getting your feet wet. Across the little bridge was a big blue whale made of fiberglass, chipped and worn from years of snow and sleet and rain. Kids had spray painted all over him with graffiti and gang tags. "It's Willie the Whale." Arthur led the way across the bridge and knelt down beside the old hulk. Pushing some veins aside, he crawled into the whale's huge open mouth. "Grandma took a picture of me in here." He struck a silly pose and grinned. "I wore a paper crown. They gave it you one when you bought a ticket. I was King Arthur. Get it?" The whale smelled damp and mildewy, like an old basement with no windows. Spiderwebs hung from the roof of Willie's mouth, filled with little mummified insects. Beetles scurried away into the dark. Slugs had left slimy trails everywhere. "This is disgusting," I told Arthur. "It was fun when I was little." He picked up a red flake of paint on Willie's tongue. "Shh." I grabbed his arm. "Somebody's coming." Without a word, the two of us pressed ourselves against the back of Willie's mouth. Somewhere near the nostrils, images of drug dealers and dangerous criminals fitted across like a little movie screen in my head. Here we were, miles from help. No one knew where we were. Mom had warned me about lonely places. Why hadn't I listened? Soon, two people appeared. One was Nina, wearing tan shorts and a plain white t-shirt, her expensive camera hanging from her shoulder strap. She looked as classy as ever. The man with her was in his 20s, maybe younger. His dark glasses made it hard to tell. He wore faded jeans with one ripped knee. His arms were tattooed from wrist to shoulder, and his hair was cut so short that you could see his scalp. Next to him, Johnny looked like an all-American boy. "It's Billy Jarman," Arthur whispered. "Nina must have taken Johnny's advice and asked him to show her the sights." He shook his head in disgust. "She should have hired me." "He looks mean," I whispered. Arthur nodded. "He's already been in jail at least twice, once for breaking and entering and once for stealing a Humvee and tearing up the magic forest with it. Knocked down a bunch of buildings and things just for the heck of it." Billy and Nina stopped on the bridge a few feet away from our hiding place. While he tossed stones at beer cans floating in the gunky water, she leaned against the rail and scanned the park as though she was scouting out good pictures. So you think it's here somewhere?" she asked Billy. "Must be. It's not at the house. Whoever killed her trashed the whole place looking for it. The cops searched, too." Billy sank a beer can with one of the stones and made an explosion sound that third graders made when they played war. "Me and Johnny were thinking of searching the house ourselves," he said, "just in case they missed anything." Nina shot Billy a frown, and he grinned. "Just kidding. We're law-abiding citizens, me and him. We'd never do anything wrong." Hearing this, Arthur poked my side and snickered. "Who do you think was riding in that Humvee with Billy when they went on their little spree?" he whispered. From the look Nina gave Billy, I had the feeling she wasn't totally convinced he was telling her the truth about his aversion to crime. Billy lobbed another stone and sunk a beer bottle. Kerpow! We didn't think anybody would ever buy Mrs. Donaldson's house, he said, but then the real estate agent got a hold of it. Mrs. DeSilvo's so slick she could sell George Washington off the $1 bill. I guess she learned some tricks from her old man. Nina looked at him curiously. What do you mean? He spat in the pond. Mr. DeSilvo ain't what most people thinks. He puts on airs and sponsors soccer teams and donates money to the library and the hospital, but you dig deep enough, you'll find out that he's got another side altogether. Maybe I should interview him. You won't learn nothing from that guy, Billy said. Like I said, he is slicker than slick. He owns the corporation that bought this property. Nina waved a hand at the kazoo in the overgrown paths and poor Willie crumbling away at the scumming pond. I hear he got her pretty darn cheap. Nobody thought it was worth anything then. I mean, the place was broke and people was starting to go to big parks like King's Dominion. You ever been there? They got some great rides. The Rebel Yell, the Cobra. Billy threw a stone at Willie. It bounced off the fiberglass over our heads with a loud thunk. Nina nodded thoughtfully and aimed her camera at the whale. Just a few more pictures, she said, and then we can leave. Arthur chose that moment to scoot out of Willie's mouth, straight into another photo opportunity. What are you kids doing here? Billy yelled. I was about to run, but Arthur walked right up to them. What's it to you? Billy scowled, but Arthur stood his ground, arms folded, and looked him in the eye. Why was he always bent on antagonizing people who could pulverize us? First Danny and his gang, now Billy. Was he crazy or what? Nina stepped in front of Arthur. I met these boys at the library, she told Billy. Logan lives in the house where Mrs. Donaldson was murdered, and Arthur lives next door. His grandmother, still scowling, Billy said, I already know Arthur and his grandmother. Well, then, Nina turned to me with an apologetic smile. Logan, this is Billy Jarman. She spoke as if we were guests at a fancy garden tea party. Meeting at the refreshment table. Pleased to meet you. I offered to shake his hand the way I'd been taught, but he ignored me. So much for being a peacemaker. I wanted to see where Mrs. Donaldson worked, Nina told us, but I was uneasy coming here alone. Johnny didn't have time to show me the park, so he gave me Billy's number. It's such a fascinating place, absolutely surreal. While Nina talked, Billy sighed and shifted his weight from his left foot to his right foot and back again, obviously bored. I asked you what you were doing here, he muttered to Arthur. You're showing Nina around and I'm showing Logan around, Arthur said in a sassy voice that made me cringe. Just now I see a copperhead sunning itself on the path near the gate, Billy said. If one of them suckers bites you... Copperheads won't bother you if you don't bother them, Arthur said in one of his most irritating know-it-all voices. I tugged at his arm to shut him up. We ought to go, I said. It's nearly dinner time. Snakes ain't all you've got to worry about, Billy went on. Dopers hang out here. Gangs. Types you don't want to be messing with. Oh, Billy, please stop. Nina looked around nervously as if she expected to see criminals lurking in the kazoo. You're scaring me. She wasn't the only one he was scaring. Thanks to Billy, the deserted park had taken a creepy atmosphere, and I was more than ready to leave. I tugged on Arthur's arm again, harder this time. My mother expects me home by... With some annoyance, Arthur shrugged his hand off of my arm. My hand off his arm. You're not scaring me, he told Billy. I've been here lots of times, and I've never seen anything dangerous. Not once. No stakes, no gangs, no dopers. Just some dopers who were too stoned to notice me. Nina stepped between Arthur and Billy. You know what, boys? Logan's right. It's almost 5 o'clock. Why don't we give you guys a ride home? We've got our bikes, I said. Billy has a pickup, Nina said cheerfully. We can load the bikes in the back. We all looked at Billy. Nina was the only one who smiled at him. You don't mind, do you? Although he didn't seem happy about it, Billy muttered, yeah, sure, to Arthur and me. He said, don't keep me waiting. It looks like it's going to rain. While we had been talking, a bank of clouds had risen above the trees, covering the sun and darkening the park. A gust of wind lifted branches, turning the leaves white side out. The kazoo reared up and swayed like a monster waving long, green, shaggy arms. We'll meet you at the front gate, Nina said. Arthur and I plunged into the kazoo and made our way to the fence. Thunder rumbled overhead and the wind picked up. Though I didn't think much of Billy Jarman, I was glad we were going to have a ride home.